Greetings from Paranormal M, the channel that brings you the most mysterious and unexplainable stories. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications to stay in the loop with our latest content. We hope you have a spooky time listening. I hear the saddest voice in the world at an unmarked cemetery in my hometown. This happened to me when I was in my teens. For obvious reasons, I'm not going to give my hometown's name, but it's located in Wisconsin. I'll try to get through this as concisely as possible. When I was about 16, two buddies of mine from high school, we'll call them R&T, told me about a cemetery that didn't have any headstones out by the lake. I'm a nut when it comes to anything creepy or unsettling, so immediately I was in. They were excited that they actually had convinced me to come with them. I was heavily depressed at the time and kept to myself. And after school got out, R drove us out to this supposed cemetery. It was nearing summer break, so it was a warm day, and where I live, warm days mean that there are creatures out fucking everywhere. We nearly crushed a little turtle family on our way there, but made a detour to pick them up and get them off the road. This hopefully shows you that there was indeed wildlife out and about. Now, one thing about the cemetery is that it was essentially in the middle of nowhere. There was a small park with nature trails around it, leading to some pretty lovely sitting areas and stuff. There was an old Army Reserve training course to the east, and further to the northwest was the mental hospital for the criminally insane. When you first come into this place, there's a boat launch where the ferry used to go back and forth across from the lake to the city directly opposite us. The thing is that this place was off the beaten path. You had to go down a marked trail for about 50 feet before taking a sharp right through the underbrush and marshlands. When we got there, there is a chain-link fence, and what I thought at first was an empty soccer field. It was eerie to say the least. R turns to me and his voice takes a serious tone. Okay, so before we go in there, there's a couple things you should know. 1, do not go in the back right corner. And 2, if you hear someone talk, don't turn around and leave immediately. I really didn't think a whole lot of this, mostly because R had a penchant for being overly dramatic about a lot of things, so I just agreed. I was eager to get inside the fence and see what this was all about. As soon as I stepped across the threshold, everything went dead silent. I mean legitimately everything. No birds sang, no crickets chirped. There weren't even frickin' mosquitoes in that place. It threw me for a loop. My stomach sank immediately, but I don't want to seem like a chicken shit, so I didn't say anything and looked around. T was a photography student, so we started to take pictures of the trees and stuff around us. R followed him for most of the time when I went off on my own. I was kind of just wandering at this point, but I stopped when my foot sank further than I expected. At first, I thought I'd fallen into a critter den or something, but I was wrong. Under my foot was a round stone disc, covered in lichen and moss. I can barely make out the numbers, 103 etched into it. My heart was in my throat. A fucking chill shot down my spine like someone dropped an icicle through my skull and it speared me through. I suddenly got a horrible feeling. That kind of feeling when you find yourself somewhere where you don't belong. I was also a stupid teen, and curiosity got the better of me. I walked the length of the field, finding more round stones with numbers on them, all worn and weathered from age. I felt sick. When I looked up, I noticed something, and I was shocked. Across from me, to my right, was a sort of sitting area with an American flag hanging limply on its mast, and a massive boulder with a carved base. I went over to look at it and found an inscription, which did nothing at all to ease my anxiety. This monument is dedicated to the 675th unarmed souls interned here. Among their numbers are doctors, nurses, and patients who were claimed during the epidemic. I don't remember the name of it, as well as Civil War soldiers who fought for the Union. I was freaked. 675? It hit me that this wasn't an unmarked cemetery. It was full of mass graves, if the unmarked stones were anything to go by. I ran at full tilt back to where the guys were hanging out, hyperventilating and saying that I was not okay with being here anymore. They gave me a shit for being a baby, but I told them I'd happily walk my ass home if they were going to be dickheads about it. I wasn't comfortable walking across literal pits of bodies. I guess that convinced them, because they agreed and we started to walk back the way we came. This is when I heard her voice. Maybe 15 feet or so behind us, a woman cried out. It was the saddest, most desperately lonely sounding voice I'd ever heard in my life. It was only a statement, but it froze me in stone. Don't go. I didn't even breathe. The R&T didn't turn around, but they did tell me to double time it back to the car. I don't remember running. I do remember the sudden blast of heat from the car door letting out the heat it collected under the sun. We were gone in record time. The weirdest thing about it, though, I couldn't stop crying. I full-on sobbed for at least a half hour after we'd gotten out of there. Like the kind of crying you do at funerals. I was so sad, and I didn't understand why. And I couldn't shake it until we parked at the McDonald's and the guy handed me a bottled water. I asked them if they'd heard what I did when I finally calmed down enough to speak. They said they did, and they were glad I was okay. I don't know who that was. She sounded like the loneliest woman to have ever existed. And I could hear the tears in her voice before I registered what she said. I wish I could have known her name, but she was 1 in 675. The odds were against me. What do I know? However, is it that we were the only people in the park when we got there, and the only people there when we left? I refuse to ever go back to that place. Something wrong with the house. I turned 16 and temporarily moved in with my friend and her family. I don't ask a lot of questions, and I've had many experiences, so when I do encounter something, I usually keep it to myself instead of questioning and asking about it. I had always been sensitive to paranormal things, so I never mentioned anything that I saw or heard. I just assumed it was just me, and kept pushing nothing more, nothing less. Well, let's jump into it. It started with me having a random sleep paralysis attack. I've always suffered from sleep paralysis, so it was normal for me. I would just watch something afterwards to calm my mind and go back to sleep, except it didn't work like that here. I had to remove myself from the room in order to even get an hour of sleep. But that's just an odd occurrence, nothing new, right? Need comfort sleep. Well, one night I woke up, fully able to move, not hallucinating or anything yet. I can hear talking in the closet. 2 kids. At first I ignored it and I was going to go back to sleep. But then I was concerned because why aren't the kids asleep right now? And why are they hiding? I decided to ear hustle a little bit. I heard the little girl whisper that she didn't like me, and the boy say that I scared him, in whispers. I shuffled into bed trying to be quiet so I can see what child is scared of me. But the closet was only slightly opened and it was pitch black in there. That's when I heard a very clear and audible, "Shh. She's awoke. She'll hear us." Then everything went dead silent. That sent chills down my spine. I just remembered that we only have 2 kids in the house, both girls, both asleep right beside me and my friend. There is no possible way I could have heard children in the closet, boy and female chattering. I didn't want to spook myself out, so I just assumed I was hearing the TV from the other room. Even though everything went silent, I just left the room and slept on the couch. just another weird thing, right? Well, that's not it. Whenever I'm in the room by myself early in the day or at night, I would hear creaking in the ceiling. At first I assumed it was the house settling, but then I noticed the creaking would start on the other side and always drag to my side until it was right above me. Every day, no matter which side I was on, it would travel in my direction, starting with a simple creak, then a pause, then it would drag closer, then pause, then it would get even closer. I always left my room when it happened, and I could hear it follow me until I passed the doorway. If I told anyone, they'd say the house was just settling, that it was my cats or mice on the roof. Whatever. You can cover that up, but you can't cover this next thing up. I'd started seeing my friend hide under the living room's coffee table and kitchen table, but I'd only walk past it and she'd disappear when I did. And I'd take a double take, so I assumed I was tripping. Nope, because one day, I was clean to the kitchen, which is next to the living room, when we saw each other clearly. I even talked to her. I said, "You're up early," and she just nodded and kept sweeping, which I assumed maybe she was just tired. I walked past her only to run into her in the hallway. I was so confused I walked all the way back to the living room and no one was there. I even started searching the kitchen in case whoever that was hiding. Nope, didn't find her. I told her I'd just seen her sweeping, but she said she had just woken up and that I was seeing things because it was early and I was still half asleep. But I wasn't, because I was washing dishes. Touching water wakes me up way more. Okay, here's the climax. I ignored all of that, but this was the final straw. I should probably explain that we don't have a door that leads immediately to the back. We have a door that leads to the side of the house, where you walk a narrow, short path to the backyard. Anyways, it was night with my friend's older brother, and he asked me to take the dog out to potty. She's a fairly big dog, a husky, mix, and she's a scaredy cat. I don't normally go out in the backyard at night, but when I do, it's quick, because you can hardly see anything in that big yard. I turned on the side light and let her out to potty. She wouldn't go, if I didn't go as well. She freely roamed the yard, and I waited by the corner of the house, under the ledge and patio part of the roof. Everything was fine. I could see her for a bit, but then I caught sight of her sniffing in a silhouette. I knew she probably finished and was just exploring and enjoying herself now. Then I heard a creak right above me. It sounded like weight was being applied to the roof, right above me, and I felt like someone was hovering over me, but of course I didn't want to psych myself out, so I just ignored it and kept watching the husky. Problem was, she wasn't sniffing around anymore. She was just staring at me, or at least in my direction. I thought she wanted to go back inside, so I called to her, and when I called to her, she shifted a bit, turning slightly towards me, then back. She seemed alerted at what I thought was me, but after further observation, I knew she was watching something else. She wouldn't move for the next few minutes, and I could hear more cracking and creaking above me. I tried to ignore it and play it off like it didn't bother me, like it was nothing. So I took a step back, and I heard it follow. I called her to come inside, but she didn't move. Then I took another step back. The movement followed me again. This sent me into panic mode, and before I knew it, I took off running toward the door. It fucking followed me to the door, and it was dragging in the corner of the roof. I can feel a strong urge to turn around and to just get inside the house. It was just as fast as me. I ran into the house and slammed the door. Thank God the husky was just as fast as me, because as soon as I took off, she took off. When we got inside, she ran right to my friend's brother's room, and from what I heard from him, she hid under the bed. I was no longer panicking. I was just pissed. I went straight to my friend's mom room when they were talking about heaven knows what, and I explained everything that happened in the backyard. I told them that I was chased into the house by something on the roof, and that it was most definitely not the house settling. That's not normal. They explained to me that there's something wrong. and that they just ignore it too. And I try to keep it from being more active, and it was a good thing I didn't try to look at what chased me, and if I did, I would have been scared. The mom told me that her daughter, my friend, had let a friend bring a Ouija board over, and they played with it all night attempting to contact spirits. And ever since, weird shit has been happening, such as seeing a look-alike of her daughter walking around, or catching a glimpse of her daughter under tables, or hearing something drag across the ceiling, following them around. She explained many different things that's been happening, and she said that they even got the house blessed, so they thought it would go away. But it only subsided. Needless to say, I stayed because I had nowhere else to go, but for sure, I now ask about certain things before staying over at someone's house. I hated being aware of my reflection after these events. I feel like it's safe to assume we all know the superstitions about mirrors and how they work in many different ways, such as portals. Well, I was around 9, turning 10, and we moved into this weird house that gave off eerie vibes that I assume only me and my brother felt. I thought you might need to know that detail. I was probably 11 when this happened. My mom was walking back and forth in the living room on the phone doing her much-needed daily gossiping, of course. I was sitting on the floor looking into a large glass case. It was made out of glass, and on one side was a mirror. I peered through the glass into the mirror, staring into my own eyes. I wanted to see the details of them. I was staring for about 2 minutes before my mom paused and leaned over and told me to stop staring into the mirror before I experienced something I wish I didn't. I didn't turn to look at her. I felt trapped staring at myself, but I answered her with a short, mm-hmm. As I said before, I felt trapped, like I had started a game I shouldn't have. I wanted to stop staring at myself, but I felt that something was off and I needed to keep watch of myself to stay alert. Still, to leave the mirror, I thought maybe rocking to check if it's still me would work, and it did. I rocked back and forth slowly. Of course, the mirror did its job and mirrored my movements. As I rocked, I felt relieved that my mother had been wrong. Nothing was going to happen to me, simply staring at myself, and she was probably trying to scare me. I smiled, feeling proud. I didn't fall for her trick, or so I thought it was a trick. Ready to get up and tell her how she didn't scare me, I stopped rocking. Well, I stopped rocking, but for some reason, the me in the mirror didn't. The mirror was smiling back at me and rocking back and forth. I was no longer smiling, nor was I rocking. I screamed, jumping away from the mirror. The movements were delayed, but the mirror once again mimicked me like it was supposed to. My mom was in the kitchen, so she got me quickly. Before I could tell her what happened, she already knew. After her "I told you so" moment, we prayed and felt safer afterwards. Something similar happened to me years later when I was 13. I was talking to my dad in the living room in a new house. My phone was turned off, but I was holding it where I could see the reflection in the corner of my eye. I don't know if I was seeing things, but for a couple of seconds, I saw my reflection turn to look at me. I screamed and threw my phone, running over to my dad in a panic. For some reason, he was calm as if he knew. I don't know what's with my parents, but they always know something. He wasn't surprised, but comforted me always. After these incidents, I've never stared too long into a mirror unless I'm focused on something other than my reflection. I definitely regret and wish I never experienced that. It felt horrible, and I would avoid mirrors for some years, not knowing that everything that reflects an image of you is a mirror. And to think I just wanted to see my brown eyes better. I was not being watched by angels. My best friend's room had 2 beds, one on each side. Whenever I came over and slept as a guest, I'd be on the bed on the right. By the end of her bed was a mirror shelf where she had her collection, and a clock. From where I am, I can see the clock perfectly fine. It was a red clock, so the numbers glowed red. Anyways, it was summer, so I could stay over for weeks, and she didn't have to sleep by 9 because there's no school. So we stayed up till 12. I never had a sleep schedule, so I only slept at 3 a.m. Let's get on with this encounter now. I started sleeping at like 1 a.m. It wasn't weird that I woke up in the middle of the night, since that was something that happens every night for me. So of course, I always woke up in the middle of the night, and thought nothing of it since it was normal. It was normal until I started to notice the time pattern I was waking up in. I kept waking up at 4:44 a.m. It happened for 4 nights in a row. I woke up and it was 4:44 a.m. or 4:43 a.m., just turning 4:44. I noted how weird it was and looked it up. Google had said something about it being energized and also some results of angel numbers. I thought it was cool that angels could be watching me and thought nothing of it. I started to wake up and take notes of the time that I woke up. Here's the order I wrote in my notes. 3:33, 3:33, 2:21, 3:32, and 4:44. I kept searching for why I was waking up in this order. I was always waking up close to triple digits. It felt weird, and every time I woke up, I felt like something was out of place and that I shouldn't be awake at this hour. It was like waking up at these hours were never supposed to happen. Everything I looked up only led me to angel numbers, meaning passion or integrity, or just some scientific response on how the human body wakes up when it's full of energy. Again, I noted the time order, 4:44, 5, 3:33, 2:22, and finally 3:36. I had woken up in a cold sweat, basically sweaty, but it feels thick and cold. And when I woke up, my hands were shaking and my heart was racing as if I just got done running a marathon or something. And I had tears coming down. My whole body was in a state of panic, and I had no idea why, since I literally just woke up. I didn't recall any scary dreams either, just woke up in a panic. My body was in a state of panic, but so was my mind. You know that voice you have in your head when you read or think? Yeah, that one. That voice in my head was telling me to stay as still as possible and not turn around. It was something like that. Whatever you do, don't turn around. Play sleep. Pretend to sleep. Don't turn around. Don't turn around. Don't turn around. Oh my God, it's there. It's behind you. You don't look. Play asleep. I have no idea why I was so scared and why my body felt scared since I just woke up. I wiped my face and tried to calm myself because it made no sense. I didn't like the idea of not being in control of my own body, especially when it was something like crying or shaking from fear. It's more insulting than scary, but everything in me was telling me not to make a sound or even move. Still being one of those professional idiots from horror movies, I decided I wasn't going to be scared for no reason and that I was going to face whatever my body had reacted to. I calmed my body down a bit and slowly turned as if I was turning over in my sleep, and peeked. And what I saw was unexplainable, so let me try to explain it. I peeked to see a large, tall shadow, deformed, hovering over my best friend, sleeping. She wasn't dead. It wasn't touching her. It was watching her in a creepy way. It definitely wasn't human either. Its shape was weird. I closed my eyes as fast as possible and my body started to panic all over again. I started to realize why I woke up in such a state. It must have been watching me. Slowly I turned over again because I didn't want to face whatever was watching my friend, and as I turned over, I caught a glimpse of the time. 3:36 a.m. I faced the wall, my back to whatever that thing was. I couldn't hear it move, but I could feel it. The closer it got to my bed, the more panicked my body became. Tears were rushing down my eyes, but I kept them closed. I could feel it over me. I could feel like I knew I was awakened. I could feel its breath as it just hovered over me for the longest time. I kept chanting prayers in my head and hoping it'd disappear or would leave. I got no sleep that night. I didn't even turn around until about 6 a.m. when the sky had light in it. When I did turn around, my best friend was still asleep, and I walked over to check on her. Found nothing out of the ordinary and still couldn't sleep. When she woke up, I asked her if she had a nightmare or anything weird happened. She doesn't recall anything out of the ordinary, and I've never seen that thing again. Till this day, I'm scared of waking up to angel numbers. I just know whatever it was watched me, and it wasn't an angel. It felt too sinister and harmful and evil to be anything like an angel. I know angels aren't supposed to look human and look scary, but this is one of those times where you just know whatever it was not there to protect you, and it was there to cause harm. My body's natural reaction, if my instincts acted all on their own, I just knew something wasn't right there, and I'm glad I never had to go through it again, at least not like that. Be careful what you wish for, except I wasn't. I should have learned my lesson the first time I wished for something, but of course I didn't. I don't believe in wishes coming true, still don't after this experience, but maybe manifesting could be a thing. First, her house had something odd going on, but she didn't tell me till after something else weird happened, about them and the Ouija board in it. Anyways, let's not waste time. It all started when I was staying with my sister, and she had this girl over, and they were being extremely flirtatious in a cringy way. Of course I wasn't upset because I support her, but also, everyone around me at the time had a relationship. I was feeling a bit lonely and overwhelmed, so naturally when they left the room, I screamed into the pillow. I started whining about wanting a relationship and even wishing out stuff like, I don't care if it's not even a real person. Anything will do, kind of thing. Obviously, nothing was supposed to happen. And if anyone told me otherwise, I wouldn't have believed it. Well, after that small, lonely, pathetic crying session, I fell asleep. I woke up in the middle of the night to something laying beside me. It had deep purple eyes and it just stared. It was laying on its side, hands under its head in a comfortable position. It was like it didn't want to wake me since it was close, but not close enough to touch, and it just stared. It was a black figure, and I knew I didn't sleep with anyone, so I freaked. I screamed, sitting up immediately, and as I sat up, it seemed to follow sitting up as well, and looked at me with a sad expression. I fell off the bed and turned the lights on, and it was gone. I didn't bother searching the room since I was taught to mind my business, and I ended up sleeping in the living room with the TV and lights on. I don't know what that was. It was really odd. At the time, I didn't care, and it seemed to just express itself since it's freaky as fuck. Its eyes were definitely not normal looking. Its body couldn't see the rest of it. I panicked too much. I know I asked for whatever, so my fault, I guess. But stuff like that happens in movies or books. You don't just wish for something and it happens the very next day or the moment. I told my sis about it, but she didn't believe me. Only when I told her some other things I saw in the house did she reveal to me that she had used a Ouija board and caused some ruckus with her friends there. Has anyone else seen a ball of flying light? This was over 13 years ago. I'm 29 now, but then I was 16. I live in a tourist town that's now a small city, about an hour and a half away from Toronto. It was a quiet winter night, close to midnight, and I was walking home from my friend's house down the road. It wasn't even a block away from my house, so my mom didn't care. It was really quiet when I stepped out, and it was a heavy snowfall, but the kind where there's no wind. There was no sounds outside at all, and the road was perfectly untouched. I got excited as I had the entire road to myself, so I walked right in the middle, leaving a fresh trail of footprints behind me. It was then that I saw something move in the corner of my left eye, and I looked up. I paused instantly and my mouth fell open because I was baffled by what I was looking at. There was a giant beach ball-sized floating ball of white light. It looked like a star, but it was floating through the treetops. It stopped when I saw it, then started floating closer to me through the trees and past the streetlights on my road, until at the last full second, it felt like time stood still and it shot up into the sky and vanished toward the full moon. I stood there trying to process what I'd just witnessed and ran only 5 doors down and left my home. I barged through the door and said, "Mom, you wouldn't believe what I just saw." I explained everything, and all she said was, "Wow, that's weird," and continues to watch TV and drink her pop as she always did. I was completely blown away. It looked similar to a ball lightning, but it wasn't. It shot into the sky, and it was in the middle of winter. Has anyone else seen anything remotely similar to this? I felt like it was following me and wanted me to see it. I've never seen it again, though. Does anyone know what this entity was that talked to me during sleep paralysis? I fell asleep but realized I was awake. I could see the entire room but realized I couldn't move my body. Slowly I turned my head to the left. I realized there was a man on my left side of my bed, crouched at eye level. He was so close that I'd almost be able to feel his breath on my face. His eyes were wide and he was talking feverishly, as if he was trying to explain something important. He had short, straight, dark brown hair, a plain dusty blue t-shirt. He was white and had average brown eyes. He wore normal jeans. He looked like he could be anybody. All I remember is a single tear go down my cheek, because I was forced to just stare at him talk feverishly without being able to hear him. He stood up and walked toward the wall, and I blacked out until the next morning. The thing is, I slept upstairs, and this was an old house. My mother was sleeping on the couch downstairs, and the door was locked. There was no way a person could break an entry without being seen from the street, and they'd need a ladder. That same year, my mom found a spiral of soil splashed on our kitchen floor beneath her window. We had no plants or animals in the house as my mother killed all plants, and her home was too small for a pet. Also, after school, my mother asked me because she was concerned. She brought me to my room and asked if I was standing on my bed with muddy shoes on. I was in shock where I could see a definite mud shoe print right on my bed. I just said no and wiped it off. I couldn't explain it, as it was midday and my mother was home all day and it was upstairs. And we lived by a busy road. There was no way someone could have physically broke in. I never had an occurrence like that after. My mind was blown. Has anyone experienced a black cat staring into your room? Last year, I was sleeping beside my fiancé. I was 28 at the time, and he was 29. We sleep in a basement apartment together. I've had a neighborhood cat that's blind in one eye hang around our garden, off and on. But other than that, no cats, especially not a black one. It was a new moon on a summer evening, and I could barely see outside my window. At first, I was in a deep sleep until suddenly I woke up from a dream that someone was staring at me. My heart was racing and I looked out my bedroom window to see what time of day it was or if the moon was out. Squinting, as I need glasses, I thought to myself how odd it was that there was a plant in my windowsill that I didn't recognize. Realizing I didn't have a plant that large in my window, I thought I'd stand up and investigate, laughing to myself about how silly I was to think it was a cat. As I got closer, it didn't move. Squinting closer, I reached my hand out until I jumped back in fear as it flicked its tail, turned and trotted away. My heart jumped and my eyes got big as I realized a cat was watching my fiancé and I in a pitch-black room through our window, and it was staring into a dark room like a statue for who knows how long. I know cats are curious. I've had a cat in an old apartment just jump through my window and onto my computer desk and rub itself on me from outside. This was different. It was just staring into the dark room for who knows how long. Somehow I knew it was there. It literally woke me from my sleep. So creepy. I swear I felt a hand grab my foot. I've lived in Chicago for a while now. A few years ago, I lived in Hyde Park, in an old classic Chicago-style walk-up. Front sunroom, long unit, 1 of 4 on a single floor. Anyways, one night I was asleep in bed with my boyfriend and her pup was up on the floor. I tend to wake up throughout the night, but the kind of wake you have in the morning. I just drift awake and then work to get back to sleep again. However, this night I was sound asleep, not even dreaming. I was so deep in my sleep, I felt something freezing cold touch my foot, and it startled me awake, like tunnel vision and hyper-awareness, immediately. It felt like a hand that had been bare out of the cold, so cold it almost felt wet. Immediately the thought of an elderly white woman with frazzled medium-length hair and small bony hands popped into my head. It took me a second to pull myself all the way together, but I definitely was startled awake now. Logically, I want to say it was just my dog's wet nose, but my feet were under the covers, and I remember my dog being asleep. I have no idea what it was. I suppose I don't know if it was even real, but it's still one of the freakier, very possible paranormal experiences I've had in my life. Although, I figure since I'm here, I might as well share the other potentially paranormal encounter that's seared into my brain. Growing up, I used to hear the shower doors in my bathroom rattle at night. Never during the day, only at night. Our house was built in the late 1800s, maybe early 1900s, like 1895 or 1910. I had these beautiful sliding glass doors as covers for my step and bathroom shower. Clearly a remodel done in the 60s, but at night they would shake. And when I asked my dad, he said 3 things on 3 separate occasions. It's probably just the house settling. It's probably just the trains. The trains were about a mile away, and I'm unsure how frequently they ran. When I asked him again, as an adult, he said, "I'm not sure what that could have been." And in response to me bringing up this prior, he said, "No, neither of those make sense. That's ridiculous. Must have been ghosts." One of my fondest memories from childhood is when I was around 5 or 6 years old. Shortly after my family and I had moved into a new home, despite being excited about our new abode, I found it a challenge to adjust to sleeping alone in my spacious bedroom. To ease my worries, my loving parents gifted me a fluffy, plushy cat to keep me company. One evening, my family gathered in the living room to watch a movie while I snuggled up with my soft companion. As the night came to a close, we all headed upstairs to our respective bedrooms. However, despite feeling tired, I struggled to fall asleep, and I was plagued by a terrible nightmare just a few minutes later. Frightened and alone, I frantically searched for my beloved plushie, but soon realized that I'd left it downstairs. Feeling too scared to venture out of my room and retrieve it, I tried to settle by burying myself under the covers. However, I felt uneasy sleeping with my back facing the room, so I turned over, only to find my plushy cat standing on all 4s as if someone had placed it there to comfort me. I was certain that that plushie had not been there before, and that my parents and brother were not responsible for its sudden appearance. Even more remarkable, it was difficult to imagine how it could have remained standing on all fours, as it was not designed to do that. While some may find this story eerie, I see it as a touching gesture of kindness. Grateful for the comfort and reassurance that my plushie provided, I took it back to bed with me, and I was finally able to drift off to sleep. This happened about a year ago or so. One night I woke myself up screaming from a dream in which my mom died in a very brutal, awful manner. Hella confused because the dream was super realistic, and I had to remind myself that she was perfectly fine, but something still felt off. A little backstory. I haven't lived with her in a long time. I started living with my paternal grandparents in high school during a really bad time in our lives, and still crashed at my house when I'm home from college. She's been doing a bit better, but she married some Duck Dynasty-looking asshat that I couldn't care for. So I don't see her too much anymore because he gives me some serious creeper vibes. Flash forward to present time, and the more I lay there and think about the dream, the worse the feelings get. I usually have pretty spot-on gut feelings, as my nanny likes to put it. You got what your mama had, that weird gift, and girl, you better use it. But I tend to write it off as paranoia. Not this time, however. I got up and called my mom. It's 3 a.m., and she's a night owl, so I expected her to answer. Nope. Not even a ring, goes straight to voicemail. I'm starting to get a little bit freaked out at this point, and I call my nanny and tell her I had a nightmare and to please try to get a hold of Mom. She doesn't question me and just tries to call her herself, but also is met with voicemail. She calls back and says not to worry and to go back to bed. She would go over to their house and in the morning to see if she was all right, but I begged her to go check now. I have a really bad feeling about this. She hangs up and I never got back to sleep. Waited around all day and finally get up and get the call that night. I don't want to worry you, but... Well, come to find out, when Nanny arrived at the house, Mom's husband's bro was gone, and she was found unconscious on the floor, covered in all sorts of shit. She was barely breathing, and they had to airlift her to the hospital and treat her for being septic and all sorts of other things. She'd fallen and broken a hip from a recent car accident, trying to get out of the bathroom and couldn't move enough to pull herself back up. Husband is an asshole and left her there to go to wherever the hell he does, and she'd been laying there for 2 fucking days. Doctor said that if Nanny hadn't found her when she did, the woman would be dead. For those curious, Mom's doing fine now. She finally listened to me that her husband is a piece of shit in a rickety-ass pickup truck, and we're going to do our best to get her divorced through. Though it's taking longer than anticipated because he's apparently in some deep shit with tax evasion and denying her insurance, attempted to murder her, etc., etc. So there's all that, but in any case, she's all right and back to obsessing over animals and Facebook quizzes. I purchased my home a little over a year ago. My girlfriend and I started noticing things from the beginning. We would always find a way to explain the phenomenon. The woman's voice my girlfriend heard while we were painting upstairs, we figured it must have come from someone outside. The constant light slamming of my laundry chute, we figured it must have been something to do with the air pressure or some kind of draft. One night we were awoken by a very loud bang on our bedroom door, as if someone had thrown their body into it. My girlfriend was frozen with fear, thinking someone was in the house. I quickly grabbed my pistol and swept each room, but nothing was there. Maybe it was just loud cracking sounds houses make. Another night I was woken up by the feeling of something pushing on the end of the bed next to my feet. In a sleepy haze, I thought it was my cat jumping on the bed, but it quickly hit me that my cat does not stay in my room at night. I wiggled my feet and whatever was pushing down stopped, I wrote it off. The whistling, the sound of a bell, the sound of something dropping, and the shadow moving across the hallway wall are all things I've explained away. But the other night was the last straw, and I'm now convinced something is haunting my home. I came from work at 11 p.m. At 11:30, I shut off all the lights, walk upstairs, and as soon as I get to the top, I feel a breeze of air coming up the stairway, and I hear a man's voice talking. I couldn't make out what was being said, but it was clear as day someone was talking from what sounded like my kitchen or near the living room, and it lasted for a few seconds. I get chills just thinking about it. It seems every day since something new has happened. Tupperware flying from the cabinet, not dropping, flying onto the floor. A lot of activity from the kitchen. Cat toys I'd seen 10 minutes prior disappear and reappear in my stairs when the cat was on the couch and nowhere near it. I could mention a dozen other things. Today I heard a disembodied whisper, which happened very fast. I haven't slept well in a few weeks. My girlfriend is freaked out every night, and I'm angry. I can't feel comfortable in my own home. I've tried telling whoever it is to leave, but it seems to do little to help. I wish I knew what to do. So I grew up in Northern Virginia, and we had plenty of battlefields and such to visit for school field trips. In 5th grade, my class went to the Belle Grove Plantation, which was at Cedar Creek Battlefield. Cool house, still has damage to her columns from gunfire from the battle. Anywho, my class was in the kitchen of the plantation, listening to the tour lady talk about whatever it is you tell a bunch of 10-year-olds about plantation life. There are these big double doors on each side of the room, and they are open. And then we hear a humming coming from outside. The teacher's aide, who I'll call Bulldog, because she looks like one, told us that whoever was humming to knock it off. But that's the thing, it wasn't any of us, and it was coming from outside. Bulldog goes outside of the kitchen, comes back in, and goes out the side that leads to the garden. She comes back, says to the tour lady that no one is out there at all. But she could hear the humming right there in the garden. Doesn't sound like much, right? Well, fast forward a few years, and I'm reading a Ghost of Virginia book. There's a story about Belle Grove in it. Apparently, the lady of the house was found in a smokehouse one day, badly beaten, half in embers, with clear fist imprints on her face. She dies just a few days later. A slave girl was accused of beating, and she was murdered and hanged for it. And the lady of the house liked to walk in the garden and was always humming, and various people over the years were witness, I guess you could say, to the ethereal humming that would take place in that garden. That just thoroughly freaked me out when I realized I got to witness it too. So when I was 14, my dad died. No need to be sad about it, he was an ass. And when he was alive, he loved to sneak up on people and scare the shit out of them. One of the ways he'd do that was to just silently creep up and chill out in the corner of your vision till you realized there was this asshole staring at you. After he passed away, I'd be sitting in the living room watching TV, and I would see him just glide up into the corner of my vision across the room and stand and stare at me from the front entryway. I'd look over and poof, nothing there. Now this can be easily written off as to me being tired or my mind playing tricks on me. But that isn't all of it. Dad loved to watch history and nature shows, and this was back when the History, Discovery, and A&E channels actually played decent documentaries and biographies and the like. He was an insomniac, so we'd always be up late with one of these channels on, and the walls were incredibly thin, and I'd always have to beg him to turn down the sound so I could sleep when I was a kid. After he died, for a few months, at least once a week, I'd be in bed and all of a sudden hear the TV in the living room. And it would be a documentary on ants or a biography of Churchill. And other things, too. It'd spook me, definitely. My brother wasn't doing it because he, for one, he's deaf. And if he were to watch TV, he'd mute it, and he also has his own. My mom worked nights, and it always happened when she wasn't home. And at this point, my sister had been living on her own for quite some time now. I'd get up to see what happened. Maybe the cat had turned the TV on, yeah? But nope. Max the tuxedo was usually with me in bed or outside, and I'd be able to hear the TV drone on about worker ants as I made my way down the hallway, through the kitchen and dining room to the front entryway. And once I'd get to the spot where I could see the living room and the TV, all noise would cease. It would be dead silent, so quiet you could probably hear a spider fart. But wait, there's more. After he passed, the locked, chained, and deadbolted front door would open all on its own and let the cat in. This one happened in front of everyone at different points all over winter, after dear old Dad had kicked the bucket. But the thing that really got me is this evening I'm about to tell you about. I was down in the basement one night watching TV. My mom was home and in the living room. Whenever she needed me, she'd stomp on the floor to get my attention. And that night, she stomped something furious. I raced upstairs, and she's sitting in a chair, with a wooden TV tray table in front of her, and on the table was a styrofoam cup, and it was shaking violently. There were no windows open, there were no fans. I picked up that fucking cup and checked for wires or strings. Absolutely nothing was attached to it, making the damn thing move at all. I put it back on the table, and it would shake again. Mom, of course, is saying that it has to be Dad doing it, and nothing else. The creepy visions, the cat coming through the bolted and chained front door, and the documentaries about ants being heard at all hours of the night freaked me out as much as that damn cup freaked me out. I knew my mom wasn't doing it. I checked and double-checked. The table was perfectly flat on the floor, doesn't wobble. There wasn't a way to make that cup move. And not the table itself, you know? It just thoroughly spooked me, and Mom kept saying it had to be Dad. He was a trickster, yada yada yada. So I just shout out, "If that's you, Dad, knock it the fuck off." And it stopped. I didn't even finish saying it when the cup stopped shaking. After the cup incident, the cat had to wait for a real live human to open the door for him. I heard no more documentaries in the middle of the night either. And I didn't ever see Dad creep up in the corner of my vision to stare at me. I do have more. I was just debating. If I want to type more, and fuck it, I'll do it. If my fingers fall off from the overuse, I can just do voice to text, right? So this story is another two-parter, maybe three, I guess, and is the most recent. My mom passed away this fall, so I flew back to my hometown and stayed at my sister's for a few weeks while we tried to get things settled and all that. The first part is that my niece, who's 9, says she had a dream about her grandma, and that grandma said she loved all her kids and grandkids. Pretty standard common thing that happens with kids and loved ones who pass away. And then one day I decided to lay down in my sister's bedroom because it wasn't that damn bunk bed I had been sleeping in. Make note, top bunks should be everyone's Murtaugh list. And it wasn't the living room where my brother had set up camp. So I'm just laying there, my back is to the open door, and I'm on a laptop fucking around on Reddit. And then something slaps me in my ass. I whip around, no one's there. The only person in the house besides me is Big Brother, who is just not a silent creep-up-on-you type, mostly because he's deaf, and has no idea how loud he even is. If I hadn't been wide awake and reading submissions over and writing prompts, I would believe it was just a hypnic jerk or some hallucination, like with sleep paralysis. but I only ever got those when I'm flat on my back. I tell my sis about it later. She then relates the story of how one day she came home and just stretched out on the couch and had what felt like someone jabbing their fingers into her shoulder. She said she turned every which way, and no matter what, she got a finger jab. So maybe they got confused and thought I was her. I don't know. And then I fly back home, and I'm with my significant other in our bedroom, and I'm telling him that it didn't seem fair that all this weird stuff happened when my dad died, but yet nothing happened to me with my mom. And I talk, there's all these people who relate their pennies from heaven stories, where they keep finding change and are convinced it's from their dead loved ones. And I joke that it'd be nice if my mom did that, but with paper money. And as I'm saying that, I reach for my PJs that are in the basket of freshly laundered clothes, and money falls out of them. It's 10 $1 bills, crisp, brand spanking new. The serial numbers on them are also in order. And it came from a basket of clothes I had just pulled out of the dryer, not even half an hour earlier. Anyone who's ever washed paper money, at least US money, knows that it would not still be crisp and brand new. It would feel weird. These bills didn't have that. They even still smelled new, like just printed. Thanks, Mom. I have two experiences that I can't explain and a story for later. The first one I'll tell you about is when I was around 15 years old, and I was having one of those dreams within a dream. Except this one was a fucking nightmare. I thought I had woke up from a nightmare that my family was trying to kill me, but I woke up in the dream, and it seemed so real for so long until the scenery changed on me, and I knew I was still dreaming, but I was so scared that I couldn't wake up for real. My mother had an old grandfather clock, and I heard it in the dream, and I remember praying in the dream, "Please, when the clock strikes 8, let me wake up." I woke up when it finished chiming. When I rolled over to look at the time, it was exactly 8 a.m. I went around the entire day wondering if I was actually awake or still dreaming. This past November, my only uncle, that I was really close to, got very ill and was in the hospital. I live 4 hours away from my family, so my mom was keeping me updated every day. The doctors didn't expect him to make it. My family didn't expect him to make it. I took a trip out there for a couple days to visit a week before Thanksgiving, and got to visit with him before he took a turn for the worse again. He looked really bad. The night I came home from the trip, I had this whacked out dream about me, my mom, my boyfriend, and his mom all staying the night in this giant building. In the dream, as we were laying down to sleep, and something woke me up touching my foot. I felt a hand grab my ankle and slide down my foot and shake it. Woke me completely up. And as I was about to open my eyes to see who grabbed me, hoping it was my boyfriend waking up and stumbling in the dark, I heard my mom say my name, clear as day. My boyfriend and I sleep with our door closed, and around the edges of the door, it looked like every light in the house had been turned on. I laid in bed for about 20 seconds, looking at the door and debating if I should open it, and decided to get my phone and look at the time. It was 4 a.m. Decided I wasn't opening that fucking door for love or money. Rolled over and got really close to my boyfriend, pulled the covers over my head and went back to sleep. My uncle passed away the Thursday before Christmas. I still have no idea what the fuck that was that night. Bubble-like object in the kitchen. I have a very young child who absolutely loves bubbles. He comes up to me and asks me to blow them and make them rain down on him sometimes. Today, much like many other days, we had some bubble time. I made lunch and put my child down for a nap. After I closed the door, I went in the kitchen to see a bubble about the size of the bubbles I was blowing, floating and bobbing around like normal. at about the height of my microwave above the stove. I was incredibly surprised. I walked up to it because I didn't expect to see one, and upon getting right up next to it, I could see it had a somewhat smoky texture to it. It also wasn't colored quite the same around the edges. I took my finger and spun around it, which caused it to act like a bubble. It just kind of spun up like the air was having an impact on it and started moving out toward my living room. It stayed at about the same height, though floating toward my living room now. It got dimmer and dimmer, and somewhere in the hallway to my living room, it got so dim that it was impossible to see anymore. I was so perplexed by it, I just followed it the whole way. I'd never seen something like it before. I have seen what I would call ghosts before, but I haven't seen one in an incredibly long time. I don't know if that bubble thing was one or not, but I don't know what else to call it. It was about 2 p.m. and unlike every other ghostly experience I've ever had, and it didn't feel like anything good or bad. It was just this object or entity or experience beside a general confusion. I finished bubble time, lunch, changing, and putting my child to bed before this experience, probably 30 or 40 minutes. I would be very surprised if this was a bubble that was somehow still hanging around for that whole time. I also feel like if it was a real bubble, it would have popped.